Thank you so much for the introduction. I've been asked to share some perspectives, lessons, experiences on how we developed our climate strategy. I'm also going to talk a bit about how we've been following it up. There we are. So back in 2019, the Directorate was sort of at a crossroad. We knew we were working with climate change, but we didn't really know exactly who was doing what, how we met this challenge in our day-to-day work. So we did a mapping exercise, and it uncovered that most of our professionals, in one way or another, worked with climate change, but we had no coordinated management practice. There was also a lack of clear guidelines or a strategic direction to take us forward. And we also had a limited overview of how our sites, our monuments, our buildings was affected by climate change. So as a solution, we decided to make a strategy. And this strategy is meant to strengthen and coordinate management efforts across different management levels and disciplines. Some of you might see that it states cultural environment management. And just to clarify, in Norway we have an umbrella term. So within anything underneath this umbrella term is what we call cultural heritage. So for the purpose of the rest of the presentation, I might use both of these way of talking about it. Our strategy is developed in close consultation with regional and local management authorities. And this was very important for us because they are the ones that are hands-on, who manages our heritage. They also had a lot of valuable insights into what needed to be done and what was lacking. We wanted our strategy to identify gaps, but also opportunities. What knowledge do we need to move forward? What issues are people facing in their everyday work? We've also written the strategy in a way that it provides recommendations for different management levels. We wanted it to be a tool for anyone who works with heritage. So if you're an owner, if you work on the municipal level, or as a county authority. This is available for you online in English, so you're free to download it and have a look. So our strategy, it acknowledges that our cultural heritage can guide us in planning for the future, facilitate sustainable development, and that the heritage sector can play a part in the green transition. At the same time, we know that climate change is increasing the impact on our heritage, and that we need to understand the mechanisms that lead to vulnerabilities, the possible consequences of climate change, and which measures we can implement to reduce loss and damage. And in order to meet these challenges, we also, and this was said by anyone involved, we need to strengthen the coordinate management practice across the levels and between the actors. We need to cooperate better. So our strategy is divided into two parts. The first one is concentrated on climate change mitigation. We have 3 goals here: improved energy performance in existing buildings, reuse and preservation of buildings, and also climate-friendly land use and spatial planning for cultural environments. The other part focuses on climate change adaptation, so to strengthen the expertise to safeguard cultural heritage and to prevent and reduce loss of and damage to cultural heritage. So just to give you I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Norwegian context, but we have a lot of mountains and we have a lot of valleys. Here you can see some of the consequences that we face. So this is one of our lovely churches, wooden buildings. This is from a flood in 2013 that actually really damaged the interior of the church and also the surrounding churchyard. There have been a lot of work after the flood, and we've gained a lot of expertise and experience with that. This is another example. This is from a churchyard, medieval churchyard, where we had a huge landslide. And as you can see, it exposed a lot of the material that was underneath. And one of my colleagues was there, and she told me that they actually had to go out in the road and pick up the skulls. They had just completely washed out. For our buildings, we know rot, pests, insects. It's a huge challenge. Also, biological growth on surfaces. This is one of our beautiful landscapes, but we are faced with regrowth. So this is taken, the picture is taken in the exact same spot. And yeah, you can see it's definitely changing. We have a huge coastline. Storms. This building used to be on the other side, as you can see. A wonderful thing, they actually managed to take it down and build it up on the exact same spot after the storm. This is in Svalbard, our northernmost island, where coastal erosion is a very huge issue. Some buildings, they have moved other places, but this is simply too big to be moved. So they've done some measures in the frontier. Okay. So part 2 of our climate strategy, it focuses on adaptation. And we have 2 goals: to strengthen the expertise to safeguard cultural environments in a changing climate, and to prevent and reduce climate-related loss of and damage to cultural environments. Within our goals, we identified different strategic initiatives. So how can we help, how can we achieve our goals, basically? We know that the knowledge of climate-related risks and vulnerabilities for heritage sites often were limited or lacking, and still is. We also know that our heritage needs to be better integrated into climate change adaptation and preparedness on a national, regional, and local level. It was therefore very natural for us when we started to follow up on our strategy to concentrate on strategic initiative 4.2 and 5.5 as a directorate. But how do we do this? Our directorate each year has an action plan on how we're following up on our strategy. So we revise it every year. I lead the work, but I have a lot of colleagues that contribute to fulfilling this action plan. We were quite fortunate when the strategy was launched that our ministry, which is the Ministry of Climate and Environment, was making their climate adaptation policy documents. So one of the first things that we did, together with our ministry, was to make sure that what we have identified in our strategy was mirrored in this overall national document. And as you can see, they do have a strategic initiative on the prevention of loss and damage to cultural environments or cultural heritage. We also wanted to really focus on how we can address these knowledge gaps and to go into understanding how risk and vulnerability assessments might be integrated on the municipal level. So in Norway, the municipalities have a lot of responsibility for our cultural heritage. This is a very good tool that was developed together with Sweden and Scotland and other countries under a project called Adapt Northern Heritage. This is also available online and you can download it. One of our first actions was actually to make use of this tool together with one of our on the south coast of Norway. We did 3 analyses, one for this is I'm not sure how to translate it, it's sort of a summer farm area. The other is a huge cultural environment that stretches along a coastline, and then it was for wooden buildings, like a protected area. One of the lessons that we took away from this work was that the tool itself is very comprehensive and it's very thorough, but it was very difficult for our municipalities to actually make use of it and understand the methodology. They were very much dependent on us to lead them in the work. And what we realized, and together with the counties, they said, well, we can't simply ask our municipalities to do these assessments alone. It's not sustainable in the long run. Another thing that has been mentioned is the Climate Vulnerability Index that's made for cultural heritage sites, for World Heritage sites. This has also been undertaken in 3 World Heritage sites in Norway. Again, a very comprehensive and thorough assessment. And I'm very interested to hear, I was fortunate to be here last year and take part in the assessment for the Coronian spit. And I'm very interested to see how you've implemented the findings from this analysis. We don't have much to... I can't really tell you how the different municipalities have made use of these assessments because they're quite new. But what we know is that talking to the municipalities, it was difficult for them to sort of translate the findings into the policies and into the practice that the municipality was already doing. We know that one of our main challenges is to integrate cultural heritage management into preparedness efforts on the municipal or county level. In Norway, the responsibility for cultural heritage lies under the Ministry of the Ministry of Climate and Environment, with our directorate as the advisory board. But counties and municipalities, several museums, they have responsibility for heritage management. However, the responsibility for emergency preparedness lies under the Ministry of Justice and Public Security, with the Directorate for Civil Protection as their directorate. So how do we merge these 2 worlds? How do we integrate heritage management into preparedness? According to the law, the municipalities and county governors are supposed to take heritage values into their assessments, so the overarching assessments. But we see that it's often very difficult for them to understand how to deal with cultural heritage values, and they are often lacking from these overall analysis. Based on the work that we did through the Adapt Northern Heritage Analysis and also the CVI, we understood that we needed to create a tool that specifically analyzes negative consequences for cultural heritage values for sites and landscapes that are understandable for the municipalities and also in line with the other risk and vulnerability work that they do. So for the past 2 years, one of our main tasks has been to develop this risk and vulnerability assessment tool for cultural heritage. This is a methodology that includes both natural hazards and climate change and human-induced threats to fully capture the risk and vulnerabilities facing heritage sites. Climate change is one of a wide range of many pressures that we know face cultural heritage, along with increased tourism, vandalism, other political priorities, and different mechanisms that might negatively impact heritage sites. Our aim has been to create a common practice for risk and vulnerability assessments for heritage that is easily integrated into municipal and regional preparedness. We have piloted this in several sites. So we've done it with archaeological sites, we've done it for churches, we've done it for large landscapes. We even did it for His Majesty's King's Guards base, which is an active military compound that also has buildings that are valuable for heritage sites. So we feel like this has been thoroughly tested. I've translated some of the tables that you fill out in the heritage sites, and together with our EEA group as the director, we hope to translate the whole assessment guidelines so it's available also in English. But to work systematically with preparedness and risk management, we need a comprehensive knowledge of possible hazards and threats. And this is why risk and vulnerabilities assessments are so vital. This guide includes a basic list of hazards and threats. So when you have your site, you sort of go through them and see what might be relevant for this site, what climate change hazards, what other threats. Once you've done that, for each of these hazards and threats, you then translate them into scenarios. What might happen to our site? We then analyze this, which negative consequences they might have, how vulnerable the heritage site is to the certain threat, and how likely it is that it will occur with the negative effects. Based on this, we can identify reducing measures, risk-reducing measures, and make informed management plans. You also get this risk matrix, so each of these scenarios will somehow end up in this matrix, which will also give you an overview of what is most prevalent. And I'm looking at Yoon here because he was part of the Adapt Northern Heritage, and some of these are actually based on the methodology that was in the Northern Heritage, but it is set into the Norwegian standard for risk assessments, which is the one that our municipalities and counties use. So it's very easily integrated into that effort. Once you've done your analysis, you will have a very good overview of how your site might be threatened. And the next step is then to make management plans. You might need to even make emergency planning. So some of the lessons learned from our work. When we tested the guideline, the municipality said, it's so good to see that it is in line with the other preparedness work that we do. This makes it so much easier for us to integrate it. This has sort of been one of our key goals, because we know that if you make vulnerability and risk analysis for heritage sites that is not integrated in the municipal system, you are very much dependent on that person being in charge of the risk management to actually take it into action. But if we make sure that it is integrated into the other management practices, we have a much more likeliness that it will actually lead to action on the other side of the analysis. We also found that the participants really liked that they could consider climate change impacts and other adverse events together. We often make separate assessments. We do one for climate vulnerability and then we do one for other events. But when we integrate them, you also see how climate change vulnerability interact with other vulnerabilities, other hazards, other threats. This is also very much in line with how you do these other assessments on the municipal level. It is to be said that it is quite challenging. So especially for threats, we know that people find it very, very difficult to see, how might someone negatively impact? Is vandalism an issue, or how do we actually quantify it, and how do we describe it, an event that hasn't really happened, and we don't really have a flood map, because then it's much more easy for the natural hazards to look at the projections, to look at the maps. But I think it also is a mindset to sort of get you into that more of a holistic way to look at your heritage sites and to see, well, what happens when we consider all of these together? The analysis gave a comprehensive overview on risk and vulnerabilities. It also gives you a way to prioritize efforts. So I go back here. Sort of if flood ends up as a very high consequence and very high probability, you know that this is something I truly need to prioritize. Other issues that are more on the low risk, you can maybe start dealing with later. This year, about 15 municipalities has received funding from us to undertake this analysis. And my hope is that they manage to do it on their own, that we've made a guideline that is so self-explanatory that they're able to go through the steps all on their own. We also are going to give our counties a course in how to do this analysis and also make them understand how heritage is placed within the larger framework of preparedness in Norway. Because we know that for heritage professionals, entering sort of the world of risk analysis and preparedness can be very daunting, or it's a whole other field of expertise that is unknown to them. But yeah, this was launched this year. The experience I talked about was all from last year. And we are getting a lot of feedback already from our municipalities. And I think there is a shift, both in Norway and also in Europe, to think more about preparedness, not just in terms of climate change, but also to threats that are very much prevalent. Also, we see with Ukraine, we see with other places in the world that our heritage is under threat. And for us to make these analyses that sort of combine both the climate change threats and other threats are therefore very welcomed from our municipalities and counties. I finally also wanted to talk to you about a quite big initiative that is going on in Norway at the moment. So some countries already have, already have a national vulnerability analysis. I know there is one for the EU, also for the UK, but this is the first one in Norway. And we are very pleased that within the 4 thematic work packages, cultural heritage is very much up there. So together with our National Environment Agency, we are leading this working group on cultural heritage and landscapes. It will be done in 2026, and it will be an important part in following up on our climate strategy. But again, this is challenging work. It is a huge undertaking, and we are very excited to see how we move through the end of 2024 and 2025. Yeah, that's all from me.